Question 1. The audit findings indicate that during a recent residential property sale in Prince Edward Island, the buyer's agent raised concerns about a significant undisclosed defect discovered after the offer was accepted but before closing. Your client, the seller, insists the defect was minor and not their responsibility to disclose. The buyer's agent has indicated their client is considering legal action. What is the most appropriate course of action for the listing broker? Option A. Advise your seller client to offer a small sum of money to the buyer to resolve the issue quickly and avoid further complications, without consulting the buyer's agent or repay. Option B. Ignore the buyer's agent's concerns, as your primary duty is to your seller client, and focus on ensuring the transaction closes as per the original agreement. Option C. Immediately inform your seller client of the buyer's concerns and advise them on their contractual obligations and potential liabilities, while also advising the buyer's agent that you are reviewing the matter with your client and will respond promptly, without admitting fault or making any commitments on behalf of your client. Option D. Contact the buyer's agent directly and attempt to negotiate a settlement by agreeing to a price reduction for the buyer, without discussing this with your seller client first. The correct answer is C. Immediately inform your seller client of the buyer's concerns and advise them on their contractual obligations and potential liabilities, while also advising the buyer's agent that you are reviewing the matter with your client and will respond promptly, without admitting fault or making any commitments on behalf of your client. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential breach of professional conduct and regulatory requirements in Prince Edward Island real estate transactions. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a dispute between parties to a transaction, requiring the broker to navigate sensitive client relationships while adhering to strict legal and ethical obligations. The broker must act impartially, protect client interests, and ensure compliance with the Real Estate Trading Act and its associated regulations. The correct approach involves immediate, transparent communication with all parties involved and the Real Estate Association of Prince Edward Island, REPAY, if necessary, while meticulously documenting all communications and actions. This approach upholds the broker's duty of care, promotes fairness, and ensures that any dispute resolution process is conducted within the established regulatory framework. Specifically, the broker must inform their client of the situation and advise them on their options, while also acknowledging the other party's concerns without admitting fault or making promises that cannot be kept. This aligns with the ethical obligation to act with integrity and to facilitate transactions in a manner that is fair to all parties. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the other party's concerns or to attempt to resolve the dispute solely by favoring their own client, without considering the other party's perspective or the contractual obligations. This failure to acknowledge and address the dispute objectively could lead to a breach of the Real Estate Trading Act, which mandates fair dealing and prohibits misrepresentation or deceptive practices. Another incorrect approach would be to offer a personal financial solution to appease the other party without consulting their client or understanding the full scope of the issue. This bypasses established dispute resolution mechanisms and could create conflicts of interest, potentially violating the broker's fiduciary duties and the REPAY Code of Ethics. Furthermore, failing to document communications and actions related to the dispute is a significant regulatory failure, as it hinders any subsequent investigation and demonstrates a lack of diligence and accountability. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the nature of the dispute and identifying the specific contractual clauses or regulatory provisions that are in question. They should then communicate openly and honestly with their client, outlining the situation and potential courses of action. Simultaneously, they must engage with the other party or their representative in a professional and objective manner, seeking to understand their concerns without making commitments. If the dispute cannot be resolved through direct communication, the broker should consult with their managing broker and consider involving REPAY or legal counsel as per established procedures. Documentation of all interactions is paramount throughout this process. Question 2. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a client in Prince Edward Island is eager to finalize a mortgage application quickly to secure a property purchase. While reviewing the submitted documents, the real estate broker notices some minor inconsistencies between the borrower's stated income on the application and the supporting pay stubs, and the credit report shows a few recent late payment notations. The client has urged the broker to just get it done and has expressed concern that any delays might jeopardize the deal. What is the most appropriate course of action for the real estate broker in Prince Edward Island? Option A. Advise the client that the inconsistencies are too significant to proceed and recommend they withdraw their offer, as the mortgage is unlikely to be approved under these circumstances. Option B. Proceed with the mortgage application as submitted, assuming the inconsistencies are minor and the client's urgency outweighs the need for extensive verification, while advising the client to be more diligent with future payments. Option C. Submit the mortgage application with a note to the lender highlighting the inconsistencies and requesting they conduct their own verification, while assuring the client that the process will be expedited. Option D. Conduct a thorough verification of the borrower's income by contacting their employer and investigate the reasons behind the late payments noted on the credit report, advising the client on the implications of these findings before proceeding with the mortgage application. Correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough verification of the borrower's income by contacting their employer and investigate the reasons behind the late payments noted on the credit report, advising the client on the implications of these findings before proceeding with the mortgage application. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island must balance the client's desire for a quick sale with their fiduciary duty to ensure the mortgage application process is thorough and compliant with the Mortgage Brokers Act, Prince Edward Island, and its associated regulations. Failing to adequately assess the borrower's financial capacity or misrepresenting information can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions for both the client and the broker, including potential disciplinary action from the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of all provided documentation to verify the borrower's financial stability and the accuracy of the information submitted. This includes cross-referencing income statements with employment verification, scrutinizing credit reports for any red flags, and ensuring the down payment source is legitimate and clearly documented. This meticulous verification process is mandated by the Mortgage Brokers Act, which requires brokers to act in the best interests of their clients and to ensure that mortgage applications are sound and not based on misrepresentation. Ethical obligations also demand transparency and diligence, preventing the broker from facilitating a mortgage that the borrower is unlikely to repay. An approach that involves accepting the borrower's self-reported income without independent verification is professionally unacceptable. This directly contravenes the duty of due diligence required by the Mortgage Brokers Act. It exposes the borrower to the risk of mortgage default and the broker to potential penalties for facilitating a non-compliant application. Another unacceptable approach is to overlook discrepancies in the credit report, such as a history of late payments or significant outstanding debts, in favor of expediting the process. The Mortgage Brokers Act implicitly requires a thorough understanding of the borrower's creditworthiness. Ignoring such issues demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to act in the client's best interest, as it could lead to a mortgage that is not sustainable for the borrower. Finally, submitting an application with incomplete or potentially misleading information, even if the borrower requests it to speed up approval, is a serious ethical and regulatory breach. The broker has a legal and ethical obligation to ensure the accuracy and completeness of all information presented to the lender, as stipulated by the Mortgage Brokers Act. Facilitating a fraudulent or incomplete application can result in severe consequences. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves a systematic review of all application components, independent verification of key financial data, and a thorough understanding of the borrower's financial capacity. When in doubt, seeking clarification from the lender or advising the borrower to seek independent financial advice is crucial. The broker's role is to facilitate a compliant and sustainable mortgage, not merely to expedite a transaction at any cost. Question 3. Operational review demonstrates that a client is interested in purchasing a property in Prince Edward Island that the seller describes as commercial. However, the property also has a history of agricultural use and is located in an area where agricultural land preservation policies are a significant consideration. What is the most responsible course of action for the real estate broker to ensure accurate representation and protect the client's interests? Option A. Conduct independent verification with the relevant Prince Edward Island provincial and municipal authorities to confirm the property's current zoning, permitted uses, and any agricultural land designations or restrictions. Option B. Advise the client based on the seller's description and the presence of a building, assuming it aligns with commercial zoning without further investigation. Option C. Inform the client that the property is likely commercial due to the building, and suggest they consult a lawyer if they have concerns about agricultural land policies. Option D. Rely on the client's understanding of commercial properties and proceed with the transaction, assuming the seller's classification is accurate. The correct answer is A. Conduct independent verification with the relevant Prince Edward Island provincial and municipal authorities to confirm the property's current zoning, permitted uses, and any agricultural land designations or restrictions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island to accurately identify and advise on the distinct legal and regulatory implications of different property types, specifically distinguishing between commercial and agricultural land. Misclassification can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions for both the client and the broker, including potential breaches of contract, misrepresentation claims, and disciplinary action from the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association, PERIA. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with provincial land use regulations, zoning bylaws, and the specific disclosure obligations under the Real Estate Services Act of Prince Edward Island. The best professional approach involves a thorough due diligence process that includes verifying the current zoning and permitted uses of the property with the relevant municipal or provincial authorities. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core of the client's inquiry by obtaining definitive information about the land's classification and its implications for development or use. Specifically, consulting official sources like the Provincial Planning Office or Municipal Zoning Department ensures that the broker provides accurate, verifiable information, fulfilling their duty of care and disclosure obligations under Prince Edward Island real estate law. This proactive verification prevents misrepresentation and protects the client's interests by ensuring they understand the property's true nature and potential. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the seller's stated classification of the property as commercial without independent verification, even if the seller has historically used it for a business. This is professionally unacceptable because it delegates the critical task of property classification to a potentially biased party and fails to account for changes in zoning or provincial regulations that might affect its current legal status. It bypasses the broker's responsibility to provide objective and accurate information, potentially leading to a client purchasing land with restricted uses. Another incorrect approach is to assume that because the property has a building on it, it automatically qualifies as commercial, disregarding any agricultural zoning or historical agricultural use. This is professionally unacceptable as it ignores the fundamental principle of verifying zoning and permitted uses. Prince Edward Island has specific regulations for agricultural land, and a broker must ascertain if such designations apply, which can significantly impact development rights and sale conditions, even if a commercial structure exists. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to advise the client based on general knowledge of commercial properties, without confirming the specific zoning and provincial agricultural land policies applicable to that particular parcel in Prince Edward Island. This is professionally unacceptable because it constitutes providing advice without a factual basis grounded in the specific jurisdiction's regulations. It fails to acknowledge that land use classifications are strictly governed by local bylaws and provincial legislation, and a broker's advice must be tailored to the precise legal status of the property in question. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes independent verification of all critical property attributes, especially those with significant legal and financial implications, like land classification. This involves actively seeking information from official sources, understanding the client's intended use, and clearly communicating any potential discrepancies or limitations discovered during the due diligence process. Question 4. Process analysis reveals that a client in Prince Edward Island is interested in purchasing a property that is offered with either a freehold title or a long-term leasehold interest. As a licensed real estate broker, what is the most appropriate approach to ensure the client fully understands their property rights? Option A. Clearly explain the fundamental differences between freehold and leasehold property rights, detailing the implications of each for ownership, duration, and associated obligations, and answer any questions the client may have. Option B. Emphasize the potential cost savings and immediate benefits of the leasehold property, assuming the client will research the long-term implications themselves. Option C. Briefly mention that there are different types of property ownership, but proceed with the transaction based on the client's initial expressed preference without detailed explanation. Option D. Present only the freehold option as it represents full ownership and is generally preferred by buyers, without dwelling on the leasehold alternative. The correct answer is A. Clearly explain the fundamental differences between freehold and leasehold property rights, detailing the implications of each for ownership, duration, and associated obligations, and answer any questions the client may have. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for conflicting interests and the need to ensure all parties understand the nature of property rights. A real estate broker in Prince Edward Island must navigate the complexities of land ownership, including the distinction between freehold and leasehold interests, to provide accurate advice and facilitate transactions ethically and legally. Failure to do so can lead to disputes, financial losses, and regulatory sanctions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves clearly and comprehensively explaining the differences between freehold and leasehold property rights to the client. This approach ensures the client has a full understanding of what they are purchasing, including the duration of ownership, any associated obligations, and the rights they possess. In Prince Edward Island, real estate transactions are governed by provincial legislation, and brokers have a duty to act in the best interests of their clients, providing them with all material information necessary for informed decision-making. This aligns with the principles of fair dealing and professional conduct expected of licensed real estate professionals under the Real Estate Trading Act and its associated regulations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Presenting only the freehold option without fully explaining leasehold interests is a failure to disclose all relevant information. This misleads the client into believing they are acquiring full ownership when they may be acquiring a right to occupy for a specified period, subject to terms and conditions. This violates the duty of full disclosure and can lead to a breach of contract and professional misconduct. Focusing solely on the immediate benefits of the leasehold property without detailing the long-term implications and the nature of the ownership is also professionally unacceptable. This selective disclosure omits crucial information about the limitations of leasehold, such as the eventual expiry of the lease and the potential for renewal terms or the property reverting to the freeholder. This constitutes a misrepresentation of the property rights being acquired. Assuming the client understands the nuances of property rights without explicit explanation is a significant professional failing. Brokers are expected to provide clear, understandable information, especially when dealing with complex legal concepts like property ownership. This assumption can lead to misunderstandings and disputes, and it fails to meet the standard of care required by the profession. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a client-centric approach, prioritizing clear communication and full disclosure. When dealing with property rights, it is essential to 1. Identify the client's needs and objectives. 2. Thoroughly research and understand the specific property rights associated with the listing, e.g., freehold, leasehold, condominium. 3. Prepare clear, concise explanations of these rights, using language that the client can easily understand. 4. Ensure the client has ample opportunity to ask questions and receive satisfactory answers. 5. Document all discussions and explanations provided to the client. Question 5. Governance review demonstrates that a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island is tasked with valuing a moderately aged, multi-unit residential building that has consistently generated rental income, but with some recent vacancies and varied lease terms. The broker has access to recent sales data for similar multi-unit buildings in the immediate vicinity, as well as information on local rental rates and operating expenses. Considering the principles of property valuation and the regulatory environment in Prince Edward Island, which valuation method would be most appropriate for this scenario? Option A, cost approach. Option B, income approach. Option C, a combination of all three approaches without specific emphasis on any single method. Option D, comparative market analysis. The correct answer is D, comparative market analysis. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island, PA, because it requires them to select the most appropriate valuation method for a unique commercial property. The challenge lies in understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each valuation approach in the context of the specific property's characteristics and market condition, ensuring compliance with the Real Estate Trading Act, PA, and its associated regulations, and ultimately providing a reliable valuation that serves the client's needs ethically and competently. Misjudging the most suitable method can lead to an inaccurate valuation, potentially causing financial harm to the client and reputational damage to the broker. Correct approach analysis. The most appropriate approach in this scenario is the comparative market analysis. This method is best suited for properties that have a reasonable number of comparable sales in the immediate market. It involves analyzing recent sales of similar properties, adjusting for differences in features, location, and condition to arrive at an estimated market value. For commercial property with readily identifiable comparables, this approach offers a direct reflection of what buyers are currently willing to pay in the PEI market, aligning with the principle of market value as defined by the Real Estate Trading Act, PA, which emphasizes fair market value. Incorrect approach is analysis. The income approach, while relevant for income-generating properties, may be less reliable if the property has a history of inconsistent rental income, unique lease structures, or if market rental data is scarce or unreliable in the specific PEI locale. Relying solely on this method without robust income data could lead to a speculative valuation. The cost approach, which estimates the cost to replace the property, is generally less effective for older or unique commercial properties where depreciation is difficult to accurately assess, or where the cost of construction has significantly changed. It often provides a ceiling on value rather than a direct market indicator, and its application might not accurately reflect the current market demand or desirability in PEI. Professional reasoning. A PEI real estate broker should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the client's objective and the property's characteristics. First, they should identify the property type and its primary use. Second, they should assess the availability and reliability of data for each valuation approach within the specific PEI market. Third, they should consider the limitations of each method in relation to the property's age, condition, and market dynamics. Finally, they should select the method or combination of methods that provides the most accurate and defensible estimate of market value, adhering to the ethical and professional standards mandated by the Real Estate Trading Act, PA. Question 6. Market research demonstrates a significant increase in housing inventory and a slight upward trend in mortgage interest rates across Prince Edward Island. A client is considering purchasing an investment property and expresses concern about the current market conditions potentially impacting their return on investment. What is the most prudent course of action for a real estate broker to take? Option A. Recommend that the client postpone their purchase indefinitely until market conditions stabilize, without providing specific data or alternative strategies. Option B. Focus on identifying properties that offer the highest potential commission for the broker, assuming the client will eventually make a purchase regardless of market timing. Option C. Advise the client to proceed with the purchase immediately, suggesting that the current market conditions are temporary and the property will appreciate significantly regardless of broader economic trends. Option D. Provide the client with a detailed analysis of current Prince Edward Island market trends, including inventory levels, average sale prices, interest rate impacts, and relevant local economic factors, to help them make an informed decision about their investment strategy. The correct answer is D. Provide the client with a detailed analysis of current Prince Edward Island market trends, including inventory levels, average sale prices, interest rate impacts, and relevant local economic factors, to help them make an informed decision about their investment strategy. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island to balance the immediate financial interests of their client with the broader economic realities of the local market, while adhering to ethical obligations and provincial regulations. The broker must avoid making recommendations based solely on speculation or incomplete information, which could lead to a client making a detrimental decision. The best approach involves conducting thorough market research and providing the client with objective, data-driven insights into current and projected market conditions in Prince Edward Island. This includes analyzing factors such as inventory levels, average sale prices, interest rate trends, and local economic development initiatives that might influence future demand. The broker should then present this information to the client, explaining how these factors could impact the potential success of their investment strategy, and empowering the client to make an informed decision based on realistic expectations. This aligns with the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association's Code of Ethics, which mandates honesty, integrity, and the duty to provide competent service, including advising clients on market conditions. Recommending immediate action based on a single, unverified rumor about a potential development project, without substantiating the information or assessing its broader market impact, is an unacceptable approach. This fails to meet the professional standard of due diligence and could lead to a client making a purchase or sale based on misinformation, potentially violating the broker's duty of care and the principles of fair dealing. Another unacceptable approach is to dismiss the client's concerns about market fluctuations and proceed with a transaction without adequately addressing their questions or providing relevant market data. This demonstrates a lack of responsiveness to client needs and a failure to uphold the obligation to provide informed advice, potentially leading to client dissatisfaction and a breach of professional conduct. Finally, advising the client to proceed with a sale solely because it would result in a quick commission, without considering the long-term implications of market conditions or the client's investment goals, is ethically unsound. This prioritizes the broker's personal gain over the client's best interests, which is a direct contravention of fiduciary duties and the ethical principles governing real estate professionals in Prince Edward Island. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes client education and informed consent. This involves gathering comprehensive market data, analyzing its implications, clearly communicating findings to the client, and facilitating their decision-making process by providing objective advice rather than personal opinions or speculative forecasts. Question 7. The monitoring system demonstrates that several real estate agents affiliated with a Prince Edward Island brokerage have licensing renewal dates approaching, and their continuing education credit records appear incomplete. As the designated broker, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with Prince Edward Island's regulatory framework? Option A. Advise each agent individually that their licensing renewal is approaching and that they are responsible for ensuring their continuing education is up to date, without further brokerage involvement. Option B. Implement a comprehensive internal tracking system with automated reminders for all agents regarding their licensing renewal and continuing education deadlines, and provide resources and support for agents to monitor and complete their required credits. Option C. Wait until an agent's license is nearing expiration or a non-compliance notice is received from the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association before addressing the issue with them. Option D. Accept agents' verbal assurances that they have completed their continuing education requirements and focus on their licensing renewal dates only. The correct answer is B. Implement a comprehensive internal tracking system with automated reminders for all agents regarding their licensing renewal and continuing education deadlines, and provide resources and support for agents to monitor and complete their required credits. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island to navigate the complexities of licensing renewal and continuing education requirements while managing a busy brokerage. The broker must ensure not only their own compliance, but also that of their agents, which involves proactive record-keeping and communication. Careful judgment is required to avoid potential penalties and maintain the brokerage reputation. The best approach involves the broker proactively establishing and maintaining a robust system for tracking licensing renewal dates and continuing education credits for all affiliated agents. The system should include regular reminders, accessible resources for agents to track their progress, and a designated point person within the brokerage to oversee compliance. This is correct because it directly aligns with the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association, PERIA, bylaws and the Real Estate Trading Act, which place a significant responsibility on brokers to ensure their agents are licensed and meet all continuing education requirements. Proactive management demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to regulatory compliance, safeguarding both the broker and the agents from potential disciplinary actions, fines, or license suspension. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on individual agents to remember and manage their own licensing renewal and continuing education deadlines, without any oversight from the brokerage. This fails to acknowledge the broker's supervisory role and the potential for oversight or oversight errors by individual agents. It creates a significant risk of non-compliance, which could lead to agents operating with expired licenses, a direct violation of the Real Estate Trading Act. Another incorrect approach would be to only address licensing and continuing education issues when an agent's license is about to expire or when a notice of non-compliance is received from the PERIA. This reactive strategy is insufficient as it does not allow for timely correction of any deficiencies and may not provide enough time for agents to complete their required continuing education hours if they are behind. This approach demonstrates a lack of proactive management and a failure to uphold the broker's responsibility to ensure ongoing compliance. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to assume that if an agent states they have completed their continuing education, no further verification is necessary. While trust is important, the broker has a regulatory obligation to ensure that the continuing education requirements have been met in accordance with PERIA guidelines. This assumption bypasses the broker's duty to verify compliance, leaving the brokerage vulnerable to regulatory scrutiny and potential penalties if an agent's claims are found to be inaccurate. Professionals should adopt a proactive and systematic approach to managing licensing and continuing education. This involves understanding the specific requirements of the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association and the Real Estate Trading Act, implementing clear internal policies and procedures, utilizing technology for tracking and reminders, and fostering a culture of compliance within the brokerage. Regular communication and training on these requirements are also crucial. Question 8. Benchmark analysis indicates a client in Prince Edward Island is interested in purchasing a property, but has expressed concerns about their ability to secure conventional financing due to a modest down payment. They have heard about government-backed loan programs and are asking you, as their real estate broker, to explain which specific program would be the best fit for them and how you can help them get approved quickly. Which of the following approaches best represents your professional responsibility in this situation? Option A. Assure the client that government-backed loans are readily available for most buyers with limited down payments and that you can personally vouch for their creditworthiness to the lender to help secure approval. Option B. Recommend a specific government-backed loan program that you believe is most suitable for the client based on their stated concerns, and offer to submit their application directly to the lender on their behalf to expedite the process. Option C. Advise the client that government-backed loans are complex and often difficult to obtain, suggesting they focus on saving for a larger down payment for a conventional mortgage, as this is a more straightforward path. Option D. Explain the general purpose and availability of government-backed loan programs in Canada, such as those administered by CMHC, and strongly advise the client to consult with a mortgage broker or lender specializing in these programs to determine eligibility and navigate the application process. The correct answer is D. Explain the general purpose and availability of government-backed loan programs in Canada, such as those administered by CMHC, and strongly advise the client to consult with a mortgage broker or lender specializing in these programs to determine eligibility and navigate the application process. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Prince Edward Island real estate broker because it involves navigating the complexities of government-backed loan programs, which have specific eligibility criteria and disclosure requirements distinct from conventional financing. A broker must ensure they are providing accurate information and guiding clients towards appropriate financing options, without overstepping their professional boundaries or misrepresenting program benefits. The challenge lies in understanding the nuances of these programs and their applicability to a client-specific situation, while also adhering to the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association, PERIA, Code of Ethics and the Real Estate Trading Act. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the broker acting as a facilitator and educator, clearly explaining the general nature and purpose of government-backed loans available in Canada, such as those potentially offered through programs like the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, first-time home buyer incentive, or provincial initiatives, and advising the client to consult directly with a qualified mortgage professional or lender specializing in these programs. This approach is correct because it respects the broker's scope of practice, which is to facilitate real estate transactions, not to provide financial advice or determine loan eligibility. By directing the client to experts, the broker ensures the client receives accurate, personalized financial guidance and avoids potential liability for misrepresenting loan terms or eligibility. This aligns with the Perea Code of Ethics regarding competence and avoiding misrepresentation. Incorrect approaches analysis. Advising the client that a specific government-backed loan program is a guaranteed solution for their situation without a thorough understanding of the program's detailed eligibility criteria and the client's financial standing is professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a misrepresentation of facts and potentially provides unqualified financial advice, violating ethical obligations. Suggesting that the broker can expedite the approval process for a government-backed loan by leveraging personal contacts within lending institutions is also problematic. While building relationships is valuable, implying undue influence or a special pathway to approval can mislead the client and may border on unethical practices if it suggests preferential treatment not based on merit or program rules. Furthermore, downplaying the importance of a formal mortgage pre-approval process for government-backed loans, or suggesting that the broker can bypass certain lender requirements due to their familiarity with the client, is a failure to uphold due diligence and could lead to the client entering into a transaction they cannot finance, causing significant harm and potential legal repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Prince Edward Island real estate should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes client education, transparency, and adherence to regulatory boundaries. When dealing with financing, especially government-backed programs, the core principle is to guide clients towards qualified financial experts. This involves understanding the general landscape of available financing options, but recognizing the limits of one's own expertise. A broker's role is to facilitate the property transaction, not to act as a mortgage broker or financial advisor. Therefore, the process should always involve clearly communicating the need for professional financial assessment and directing clients to appropriate specialists for detailed advice and application processes. Question 9. Process analysis reveals a client in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, is interested in purchasing a property with the intention of operating a niche retail business that may not align with the current zoning designation. What is the most responsible and ethically sound approach for a Prince Edward Island real estate broker to take in this situation? Option A. Assure the client that zoning can be easily changed to accommodate their desired use and that the broker will facilitate this process. Option B. Advise the client that the broker will personally handle all necessary zoning amendments to ensure their business can operate on the property. Option C. Research the current zoning bylaws for the specific property and clearly communicate the findings to the client, advising them to consult with the local planning department regarding potential zoning amendments or variances. Option D. Inform the client that their intended use is permissible without verifying the current zoning bylaws, as the property appears suitable. Correct answer is C. Research the current zoning bylaws for the specific property and clearly communicate the findings to the client, advising them to consult with the local planning department regarding potential zoning amendments or variances. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's desire for a specific property use and the existing zoning regulations of Prince Edward Island. A real estate broker must navigate this by providing accurate information and managing client expectations without misrepresenting the feasibility of their plans. Failure to do so can lead to significant legal and ethical repercussions, including potential disciplinary action from the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association and financial loss for the client. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves thoroughly researching the current zoning bylaws applicable to the specific property in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, and then clearly communicating these findings to the client. This approach directly addresses the client's inquiry by providing factual information about land use restrictions. It aligns with the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association's Code of Ethics, which mandates honesty, integrity, and the provision of accurate information to clients. By advising the client to consult with the local planning department, the broker ensures the client receives definitive guidance on potential zoning amendments or variances, thereby managing expectations realistically and ethically. Correct approaches analysis. Advising the client that zoning can be easily changed to accommodate their desired use without any investigation into the actual process or likelihood of approval is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This misrepresents the complexity and authority of municipal zoning bylaws in Prince Edward Island and creates false hope, potentially leading the client to incur expenses based on an unfounded assumption. Furthermore, assuring the client that their intended use is permissible without verifying the current zoning bylaws is a direct violation of the duty to provide accurate information. This could expose the broker to liability if the client proceeds with the purchase and is later unable to implement their plans due to zoning restrictions. Suggesting that the broker will personally handle all zoning amendments without possessing the necessary expertise or authority is also unprofessional and potentially misleading. Zoning changes are a formal municipal process, and a real estate broker's role is to inform, not to guarantee or execute such changes. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach when faced with client inquiries that touch upon regulatory matters. This involves 1. Active listening, understand the client's full intent and requirements. 2. Information gathering, proactively research all relevant regulations, in this case, the specific zoning bylaws for the property's municipality in Prince Edward Island. 3. Transparent communication, clearly and honestly convey all findings, including limitations and potential challenges. 4. Expert referral, guide clients to appropriate authorities or professionals, e.g., municipal planning departments, legal counsel, for definitive answers or assistance with complex processes like zoning amendments. 5. Expectation management. Ensure the client has realistic expectations about the feasibility of their plans based on the gathered information. Question 10. Strategic planning requires a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island to accurately calculate prorated expenses for a property sale. The annual property tax for property is $1,825. The closing date for the sale is March 15th. Assuming a standard year, not a leap year, what is the correct amount of property tax the seller is responsible for, and what is the correct amount the buyer is responsible for, based on a daily proration up to and including the closing date? Option A. Seller $912.50, buyer $912.50. Option B. Seller $755.48, buyer $1,069.52. Option C. Seller $1,825.00, buyer $0,000. Option D. Seller $756.00, buyer $1,069.00. Correct answer is B. Seller $755.48, buyer $1,069.52. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in real estate transactions in Prince Edward Island, accurately calculating and prorating expenses when a sale closes mid-month. The professional challenge lies in ensuring fairness to both the buyer and seller, adhering to the terms of the purchase and sale agreement, and complying with provincial real estate regulations regarding financial settlements. Miscalculations can lead to disputes, financial losses for one party, and potential breaches of contract, impacting the brokerage reputation and potentially leading to disciplinary action. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a precise calculation of the daily cost of the property tax, and then prorating it based on the exact number of days each party is responsible for the expense up to and including the closing date. This method ensures that neither the buyer nor the seller is unfairly burdened with costs for a period they do not own or possess the property. The Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association, PERIA, standards and common contractual practices dictate that prorations are calculated to the day of closing, with the seller being responsible for the expenses up to, but not including, the closing day, and the buyer responsible from the closing day onwards. This aligns with the principle of equitable apportionment of costs. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply divide the annual property tax by 2 and assign half to each party. This fails to account for the specific closing date and can result in a significant financial imbalance, especially if the closing occurs early or late in the year. It violates the principle of accurate proration as expected in real estate transactions and mandated by fair settlement practices. Another incorrect approach is to round the daily tax amount to the nearest dollar before prorating. This introduces inaccuracies and can lead to a discrepancy, however small, that is not reflective of the actual cost incurred by each party. Real estate settlements require precision, and rounding introduces an arbitrary element that is not contractually or regulatorily sound. A third incorrect approach is to assign the entire month's property tax to the seller, regardless of the closing date. This is fundamentally unfair to the buyer, who will only own the property for a portion of the month but would be charged for the full month's tax. This directly contravenes the principles of equitable cost sharing and the standard practice of prorating expenses based on ownership duration. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Prince Edward Island must always prioritize accuracy and fairness in financial settlements. When faced with prorations, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying all relevant expenses to be prorated as per the purchase and sale agreement. 2. Determining the total cost of each expense for the relevant period, e.g., annual property tax. 3. Calculating the precise daily cost of the expense. 4. Applying the proration formula, ensuring the seller is responsible up to, but not including, the closing date, and the buyer is responsible from the closing date onwards. 5. Clearly documenting the calculation on the statement of adjustments for review by both parties and their legal representatives. Question 11. The performance metrics show a consistent pattern of tenant requests for urgent plumbing repairs at a property managed in Prince Edward Island. As the property manager, you receive a call from a tenant reporting a significant leak under their kitchen sink that is causing minor water damage. What is the most appropriate course of action to optimize the property management process while adhering to Prince Edward Island's regulatory framework? Option A. Advise the tenant that they will need to contact the property owner directly to arrange for the repair, as plumbing issues are the owner's sole responsibility. Option B. Inform the tenant that the repair will be scheduled as soon as possible, but that it may take several days to get a plumber due to high demand, without consulting the owner first. Option C. Immediately contact the property owner to inform them of the leak, describe the situation, and request their authorization to engage a licensed plumber to assess and repair the issue, providing an estimated cost if possible. Option D. Proceed to hire a plumber immediately to fix the leak, assuming the owner will approve the expense given the urgency, and inform the owner of the completed repair and the invoice afterwards. Correct answer is C. Immediately contact the property owner to inform them of the leak, describe the situation, and request their authorization to engage a licensed plumber to assess and repair the issue, providing an estimated cost if possible. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a property manager in Prince Edward Island to balance the financial interests of the property owner with the legal and ethical obligations owed to tenants, all while operating within the specific framework of Prince Edward Island's residential tenancy legislation and real estate brokerage regulations. The pressure to quickly resolve a maintenance issue without proper due diligence can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions for both the property manager and the owner. The best approach involves promptly informing the property owner of the issue and seeking their explicit approval for the repair, while also providing them with a clear understanding of the potential costs and options. This aligns with the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association, PIRA, Code of Ethics, and the Prince Edward Island Residential Tenancy Act. The property manager has a fiduciary duty to the owner to act in their best interest, which includes transparent communication and obtaining authorization for expenditures. Simultaneously, the manager must ensure that tenant rights are respected by addressing necessary repairs in a timely manner as mandated by the Residential Tenancy Act. This approach prioritizes informed decision-making, legal compliance, and ethical conduct. An incorrect approach involves proceeding with a significant repair without obtaining the owner's explicit consent, even if the manager believes it is in the owner's best interest. This violates the property manager's fiduciary duty to the owner, as it bypasses the owner's right to approve expenditures. It also risks the owner refusing to pay for the repair, leaving the property manager liable. Furthermore, if the repair is not performed to a satisfactory standard or is unnecessary, it could lead to disputes with the tenant and potential claims against the property manager's errors and omissions insurance. Another incorrect approach is to delay addressing the tenant's maintenance request significantly. The Prince Edward Island Residential Tenancy Act outlines the landlord's, and by extension, the property manager's, responsibility to maintain the rental unit in a good state of repair. Unreasonable delays can result in the tenant filing a complaint with the Residential Tenancy Commission, potentially leading to rent abatement, orders for repair, or even termination of the tenancy agreement, all of which negatively impact the property owner and reflect poorly on the property manager's competence and adherence to provincial law. A final incorrect approach is to inform the tenant that the owner will be solely responsible for the repair costs without the property manager's involvement in facilitating the process. While the owner ultimately bears the financial responsibility, the property manager, as the designated representative, has a duty to manage the situation professionally. This includes coordinating the repair, ensuring it is done correctly, and managing the communication flow, thereby upholding their professional obligations and ensuring compliance with the Residential Tenancy Act's requirements for timely maintenance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific legal and ethical obligations under Prince Edward Island law and the brokerage policies. This involves clear, documented communication with all parties, prioritizing transparency and seeking authorization for significant decisions or expenditures. When faced with maintenance issues, the process should be: 1. Acknowledge the tenant's request promptly. 2. Assess the urgency and nature of the repair. 3. Inform the property owner of the issue, providing details and potential solutions/costs. 4. Obtain written authorization from the owner before proceeding with repairs exceeding a predefined threshold. 5. Coordinate and oversee the repair process. 6. Inform the tenant of the repair schedule and completion. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates that a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island is assisting a client who is seeking to purchase a property. The client has expressed a strong preference for a neighborhood with a specific demographic profile and has indicated that they would prefer not to live near families with young children. How should the broker proceed to ensure compliance with Prince Edward Island's fair housing laws and anti-discrimination regulations? Option A. The broker should politely inform the client that they cannot accommodate such specific neighborhood preferences due to potential legal issues and suggest the client find another agent. Option B. The broker should explain to the client that their preferences may violate the Prince Edward Island Human Rights Act, specifically regarding family status, and discuss how to proceed in a manner that is compliant with the law, focusing on objective property criteria rather than personal characteristics. Option C. The broker should subtly steer the client towards properties in areas that align with their demographic preference, without explicitly mentioning the client's discriminatory concerns to the seller or other agents. Option D. The broker should immediately begin searching for properties exclusively in neighborhoods that match the client's stated demographic preference and avoid areas with a high concentration of families with young children. The correct answer is B. The broker should explain to the client that their preferences may violate the Prince Edward Island Human Rights Act, specifically regarding family status, and discuss how to proceed in a manner that is compliant with the law, focusing on objective property criteria rather than personal characteristics. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker to navigate a delicate situation where a potential client's personal circumstances could be misconstrued as a basis for discrimination, even if that is not the intent. The broker must uphold their fiduciary duty to their client while strictly adhering to Prince Edward Island's fair housing laws. The core challenge lies in balancing the client's stated preferences with the legal and ethical obligation to avoid discriminatory practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any actions taken are compliant and do not inadvertently lead to discrimination. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of the Prince Edward Island Human Rights Act. This approach prioritizes educating the client about their legal obligations and the protected grounds under the Act, such as family status, source of income, and marital status. The broker must explain that while a client can express preferences, the broker cannot act on those preferences if they result in discrimination. The broker's role is to facilitate a transaction that is fair and legal for all parties. This aligns with the ethical duty of a real estate professional to act with integrity and to ensure that their services do not contribute to discriminatory housing practices. The broker should guide the client towards making decisions that are compliant with the law, focusing on objective criteria rather than protected characteristics. An incorrect approach would be to directly implement the client's stated preference without any further consideration or discussion. This fails to acknowledge the potential for discrimination inherent in the request and bypasses the broker's responsibility to ensure compliance with fair housing legislation. Such an action could lead to a violation of the Prince Edward Island Human Rights Act, exposing both the broker and the client to legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach involves dismissing the client's request outright without attempting to educate them on fair housing principles. While the intention might be to avoid discrimination, this method lacks professionalism and fails to fulfill the broker's duty to guide and inform their client. It misses an opportunity to foster understanding and compliance. A further incorrect approach is to subtly steer the client away from certain properties or areas based on the client's stated preferences, even if the broker believes they are acting in the client's best interest. This indirect method of discrimination is still a violation of fair housing laws and undermines the principles of equal opportunity in housing. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive approach to understanding and applying fair housing laws. When faced with a client request that raises potential fair housing concerns, a broker should 1. Identify the protected grounds under the relevant legislation, in this case, the Prince Edward Island Human Rights Act. 2. Educate the client about these protected grounds and the broker's legal and ethical obligations. 3. Discuss how the client's request might intersect with these protected grounds. 4. Guide the client towards compliant alternatives that meet their needs without resorting to discriminatory practices. 5. Document all discussions and actions taken to ensure transparency and accountability. Question 13. The assessment process reveals a client in Prince Edward Island is purchasing a property and has expressed interest in how the ownership will be structured. They have heard terms like joint ownership and shared property and are unsure of the implications for their rights and future disposition of the property. Which of the following best describes the professional obligation of a Prince Edward Island real estate broker in this situation? Option A. Advise the client that all property purchases in Prince Edward Island automatically result in fee simple ownership unless otherwise specified in the purchase agreement. Option B. Recommend that the client seek legal advice only after the purchase agreement has been signed, assuming the complexities of ownership structures are a matter for lawyers to resolve post-closing. Option C. Proceed with the transaction based on the client's general understanding of joint ownership, without elaborating on the specific legal distinctions between joint tenancy and tenancy in common. Option D. Clearly explain the differences between fee simple, leasehold, joint tenancy, and tenancy in common, detailing the rights and responsibilities associated with each, and ensuring the client understands the implications for their specific transaction. Correct answer is D. Clearly explain the differences between fee simple, leasehold, joint tenancy, and tenancy in common, detailing the rights and responsibilities associated with each, and ensuring the client understands the implications for their specific transaction. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common point of confusion for real estate professionals in Prince Edward Island, distinguishing between different forms of property ownership. This scenario is professionally challenging because a misunderstanding of these distinctions can lead to significant legal and financial consequences for both clients and the real estate professional. Accurate advice on ownership structures is fundamental to fulfilling fiduciary duties and ensuring compliance with the Real Estate Trading Act, PAY, and its associated regulations. The best professional approach involves clearly identifying the nature of the ownership interest being transferred or advised upon. This means understanding the rights and responsibilities associated with each type of ownership, such as fee simple, leasehold, joint tenancy, and tenancy in common, as defined under Prince Edward Island law. A real estate professional must be able to explain these differences to their clients, ensuring the client fully comprehends the implications of their chosen ownership structure. This includes advising on the rights of survivorship in joint tenancies, the undivided interests in tenancies in common, the limitations of leasehold interests, and the absolute ownership rights of fee simple estates. This thoroughness ensures informed consent and adherence to professional standards of care. An incorrect approach would be to assume that all property transfers involve fee simple ownership without verifying the specific nature of the title. This oversight fails to acknowledge the distinct legal frameworks governing leasehold interests, which grant possession but not outright ownership, or joint tenancies and tenancies in common, which involve multiple owners with differing rights and severability. Another incorrect approach is to provide advice on ownership structures without a clear understanding of the underlying legal principles in Prince Edward Island, potentially misrepresenting the client's rights or obligations. This could lead to disputes, breaches of contract, and disciplinary action under the Real Estate Trading Act, PEA. Furthermore, failing to document the advice provided regarding ownership structures leaves the professional vulnerable and without a record of their professional guidance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes client education and accurate legal interpretation. This involves actively seeking clarification on title documents, consulting with legal counsel when necessary, and ensuring all advice is tailored to the specific circumstances and the laws of Prince Edward Island. A commitment to ongoing professional development in property law is crucial for maintaining competence and ethical practice. Question 14. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a Phase I environmental site assessment, ESSA, for a commercial property in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, has identified potential historical contamination. As the listing broker, what is the most prudent course of action to ethically and legally represent your client while ensuring transparency? Option A. Suggest the client disclose that a Phase I ESA was completed, but withhold the specific findings unless directly questioned by a potential buyer. Option B. Recommend that the client proceed with the sale without further environmental testing, as the Phase I ESA is often a preliminary step and may not indicate actual contamination. Option C. Advise the client that the Phase I ESA findings warrant further investigation, such as a Phase II ESA, to fully understand the nature and extent of any potential contamination and its implications for the property's value and marketability. Option D. Advise the client to only disclose the Phase I ESA findings if the buyer's lawyer specifically requests them during the due diligence period. The correct answer is C. Advise the client that the Phase I ESA findings warrant further investigation, such as a Phase II ESA, to fully understand the nature and extent of any potential contamination and its implications for the property's value and marketability. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island to navigate the intersection of environmental due diligence and client representation. The broker must balance the client's desire for a swift transaction with the legal and ethical obligations to disclose known environmental concerns that could impact property value and future use. Failure to do so can lead to significant legal liabilities, reputational damage, and breaches of professional conduct. The broker's role extends beyond facilitating a sale to ensuring informed consent and mitigating risks for all parties involved, as mandated by Prince Edward Island's real estate regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves proactively engaging with the client to discuss the implications of the Phase I ESA findings and recommending further investigation. This approach is correct because it aligns with the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association's Code of Ethics and the Real Estate Services Act, which mandate honesty, integrity, and the duty to disclose material facts. By advising the client to obtain a Phase II ESA, the broker is facilitating informed decision-making, allowing the client to understand the full scope of potential environmental issues, their remediation costs, and their impact on the property's marketability. This demonstrates a commitment to client best interests and adherence to regulatory disclosure requirements. Incorrect approaches analysis. Advising the client to ignore the Phase I ESA findings and proceed with the sale without further investigation is professionally unacceptable. This approach violates the duty of disclosure, as it deliberately withholds material information that could significantly affect the property's value and the buyer's decision. It exposes both the seller and the broker to potential legal action for misrepresentation or failure to disclose. Suggesting the client simply disclose that a Phase I ESA was conducted, but not its findings, is also professionally unsound. While technically acknowledging the assessment, it fails to convey the critical information derived from it. This is a form of selective disclosure, which is ethically and legally problematic, as it does not provide the buyer with a complete picture of potential environmental risks. Recommending that the client only disclose the Phase I ESA findings if specifically asked by the buyer is a dangerous and unethical strategy. This approach relies on the buyer's diligence and potentially their lack of expertise in environmental matters. It shifts the burden of discovery onto the buyer and fails to meet the broker's proactive duty to disclose known material facts, which is a cornerstone of responsible real estate practice in Prince Edward Island. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Prince Edward Island must adopt a proactive and transparent approach to environmental due diligence. When environmental assessments reveal potential issues, the broker's primary responsibility is to ensure their client is fully informed and to facilitate the disclosure of this information to potential buyers. This involves understanding the implications of assessment reports, advising on necessary next steps, like further testing, and ensuring all material facts are communicated clearly and honestly. This process protects the client, the buyer, and the broker's professional integrity. Question 15. During the evaluation of a residential lease agreement for a property in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, a real estate broker identifies several clauses that appear to deviate from standard practices and may not fully align with the Residential Tenancies Act. The landlord has provided the lease and expects the broker to facilitate its signing. What is the most appropriate course of action for the broker to ensure compliance and protect all parties involved? Option A. Make suggested amendments to the lease agreement based on your understanding of standard practices and advise the tenant to sign it, assuming the landlord will agree to the changes. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the lease agreement, identifying any potentially problematic clauses, and then discuss these concerns with the landlord, providing explanations based on Prince Edward Island's residential tenancy laws and recommending necessary revisions before presenting it to the tenant. Option C. Present the lease agreement to the tenant as provided by the landlord, advising the tenant to read it carefully and seek independent legal advice if they have any concerns. Option D. Advise the tenant to consult with a lawyer immediately to review the lease agreement, without conducting an initial review of the document yourself. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the lease agreement, identifying any potentially problematic clauses, and then discuss these concerns with the landlord, providing explanations based on Prince Edward Island's residential tenancy laws and recommending necessary revisions before presenting it to the tenant. Question 16. What factors determine the appropriate level of guidance a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island can provide regarding mortgage financing options to a prospective buyer? Option A. The broker's understanding of the client's general financial situation and objectives, coupled with knowledge of available mortgage product categories, and the clear directive to seek specialized advice from licensed financial professionals. Option B. The broker's personal experience with specific lenders and their perceived ability to secure favorable terms for the client. Option C. The broker's assessment of the client's urgency to purchase and their willingness to explore unconventional financing avenues. Option D. The broker's ability to compare detailed interest rates, amortization schedules, and mortgage features from various financial institutions. The correct answer is A. The broker's understanding of the client's general financial situation and objectives, coupled with knowledge of available mortgage product categories, and the clear directive to seek specialized advice from licensed financial professionals. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island to navigate the complexities of mortgage financing options for a client, while ensuring compliance with provincial real estate legislation and ethical duties. The broker must balance the client's immediate needs with the long-term financial implications and regulatory requirements, avoiding any misrepresentation or undue influence. The challenge lies in providing informed guidance without offering unlicensed financial advice. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves thoroughly understanding the client's financial situation and objectives, then educating them on the general types of mortgage financing available in Prince Edward Island, such as conventional mortgages, government-insured mortgages like CMHC, and potentially alternative lending options. The broker should explain the basic characteristics, pros, and cons of each type in a neutral and informative manner. Crucially, the broker must then advise the client to consult with a qualified and licensed mortgage broker or financial institution to obtain specific pre-approval and personalized advice tailored to their unique financial profile. This approach aligns with the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Trading Act, which prohibits real estate licensees from providing financial advice or acting as mortgage brokers, unless they hold the appropriate licenses. The broker's role is to facilitate the real estate transaction, not to act as a financial advisor. Incorrect approach is analysis, recommending a specific lender or mortgage product based on personal preference or a perceived benefit to the broker, e.g. a referral fee, is an ethical failure and a violation of the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Trading Act. This constitutes acting outside the scope of a real estate license and potentially misrepresenting the suitability of a product. Suggesting that the client can secure financing through informal channels or by bypassing licensed professionals is also professionally unacceptable. This could expose the client to predatory lending practices or fraudulent schemes, and the broker would be failing in their duty of care and potentially violating provisions related to due diligence and client protection under provincial law. Providing detailed comparisons of interest rates, amortization periods, and specific mortgage terms for various lenders, even if presented as helpful information, crosses the line into providing financial advice. This is an area reserved for licensed mortgage professionals and financial institutions in Prince Edward Island. The broker's lack of licensing in this area means they cannot offer such specialized advice, and doing so could lead to liability if the client suffers financial loss due to the information provided. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Prince Edward Island should adopt a client-centric approach that prioritizes transparency, education, and adherence to regulatory boundaries. When dealing with financing, the decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the client's broad financial goals and needs related to property purchase. 2. Providing general information about available financing categories relevant to the Prince Edward Island market. 3. Clearly delineating the broker's role and limitations, emphasizing the need for specialized advice from licensed professionals. 4. Actively referring clients to qualified and licensed mortgage brokers or financial institutions for personalized assessment and product selection. 5. Documenting all advice and referrals provided to the client. Question 17. Governance review demonstrates that a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island is advising a client who is purchasing a property and has expressed a strong preference for predictable monthly payments. The client is seeking guidance on mortgage options. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional ethical obligations and client best interests in this scenario? Option A. Suggest an interest-only mortgage, as this will result in the lowest possible monthly payments, allowing the client to maximize their cash flow for other investments or expenses. Option B. Explain the features of fixed-rate, adjustable rate, and interest-only mortgages, emphasizing how each impacts payment predictability and long-term financial commitment, and then guide the client to choose the option that best fits their stated preference for predictable payments, while also discussing potential future implications. Option C. Focus solely on the fixed-rate mortgage, as it is the only option that guarantees completely stable payments, and advise the client that any other mortgage type carries too much risk for their stated preference. Option D. Recommend an adjustable rate mortgage, highlighting its typically lower initial interest rate and monthly payments, as this directly addresses the client's desire for lower immediate financial outlay. The correct answer is B. Explain the features of fixed-rate, adjustable rate, and interest-only mortgages, emphasizing how each impacts payment predictability and long-term financial commitment, and then guide the client to choose the option that best fits their stated preference for predictable payments, while also discussing potential future implications. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island to accurately advise a client on mortgage types, balancing the client's stated preferences with the potential long-term financial implications and regulatory disclosure obligations. Misrepresenting or failing to adequately explain the nuances of different mortgage products can lead to client dissatisfaction, financial harm, and potential breaches of professional conduct under Prince Edward Island's real estate regulations. Careful judgment is required to ensure the client makes an informed decision aligned with their financial situation and risk tolerance. The best professional practice involves thoroughly explaining the characteristics and implications of each mortgage type, focusing on how each aligns with the client's stated preference for predictable payments, while also highlighting potential future adjustments and risks. This includes detailing how a fixed-rate mortgage offers payment stability over its term, making it suitable for clients prioritizing predictability. It also necessitates explaining that While an adjustable rate mortgage might offer a lower initial rate, its payments can increase, and an interest-only mortgage, while reducing initial payments, does not build equity and carries significant long-term repayment obligations. The broker must ensure the client understands these distinctions and their potential impact on their financial future, fulfilling the duty of care and disclosure mandated by the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association's Code of Ethics and the Real Estate Services Act, an approach that prioritizes the client's immediate stated preference for lower initial payments, without fully exploring the long-term implications of adjustable rate or interest-only mortgages, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the duty of care to ensure the client understands the full financial picture and potential risks associated with each product. Specifically, recommending an adjustable rate mortgage solely based on a lower initial rate without a comprehensive discussion of interest rate risk and potential payment increases would be a failure to adequately inform the client. Similarly, suggesting an interest-only mortgage without a clear understanding of the client's long-term repayment strategy and the fact that no principal is being paid down would be a significant ethical lapse, potentially leading to a future inability to repay the loan. Professionals should employ a client-centric decision-making process that begins with active listening to understand the client's stated needs and concerns. This should be followed by a comprehensive educational phase where all relevant product options are explained in clear, understandable terms, highlighting both benefits and drawbacks. The broker must then facilitate a discussion to assess the client's risk tolerance, financial capacity, and long-term goals, guiding them towards a decision that is in their best interest, rather than simply fulfilling their initial request without due diligence. Question 18. The control framework reveals a situation where a mortgage broker in Prince Edward Island is processing an application for a first-time homebuyer. The mortgage requires mortgage default insurance, and the broker is aware of the premium amount and how it is added to the mortgage principal. What is the most appropriate action for the broker to take regarding the disclosure of this insurance to the borrower? Option A. Provide the borrower with a written document detailing the mortgage default insurance premium, how it is financed, and its impact on the total cost of the mortgage, and confirm the borrower's understanding. Option B. Verbally inform the borrower that mortgage default insurance is required and that there is a premium associated with it. Option C. Assume the lender has fully disclosed all insurance-related costs to the borrower, and therefore no further action is needed from the broker. Option D. Wait until the final mortgage commitment is issued to inform the borrower about the mortgage default insurance premium and its financing. The correct answer is A. Provide the borrower with a written document detailing the mortgage default insurance premium, how it is financed, and its impact on the total cost of the mortgage, and confirm the borrower's understanding. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common implementation challenge in the mortgage application process within Prince Edward Island, ensuring timely and accurate disclosure of all material information to the borrower, particularly concerning mortgage default insurance. This scenario is professionally challenging because a broker's failure to fully disclose can lead to significant financial and legal repercussions for the client, damage the broker's reputation, and violate regulatory obligations. Careful judgment is required to navigate the complexities of mortgage products and the specific disclosure requirements mandated by Prince Edward Island's real estate and mortgage lending regulations. The correct approach involves proactively providing the borrower with all required documentation, including clear explanations of mortgage default insurance premiums, their impact on the overall mortgage cost, and the conditions under which they are applied. This proactive disclosure, ideally in writing and confirmed with the borrower's understanding, aligns with the principles of client best interest and the disclosure obligations under Prince Edward Island's mortgage brokering and consumer protection legislation. It ensures the borrower can make an informed decision about their mortgage financing. An incorrect approach that involves only verbally mentioning the existence of mortgage default insurance without providing details on its cost or implications fails to meet the regulatory standard for full disclosure. This omission can mislead the borrower into believing the mortgage costs are lower than they actually are, potentially leading to financial strain and a breach of the broker's duty of care. Another incorrect approach, which is to assume the lender has already fully explained all insurance costs to the borrower abdicates the broker's responsibility. Lenders have their own disclosure obligations. The mortgage broker in Prince Edward Island is also directly responsible for ensuring the client understands the terms and costs of the mortgage product they are obtaining, including any mandatory insurance components. Relying solely on the lender's disclosure is a failure to act in the client's best interest and a potential violation of regulatory oversight. Finally, an approach that delays providing information about mortgage default insurance until the final stages of the transaction, or only when specifically asked by the borrower, is also professionally unacceptable. This delay can prevent the borrower from fully assessing their financial commitments early in the process, potentially causing them to proceed with a mortgage they cannot comfortably afford or to feel misled once the full costs become apparent. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency and client understanding. This involves anticipating potential areas of confusion for borrowers, such as insurance costs, and proactively addressing them with clear, comprehensive, and documented information. Regular review of regulatory requirements and best practices for disclosure in Prince Edward Island is essential to maintain compliance and uphold ethical standards. Question 19. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island is meeting with a new seller who wants maximum exposure for their property, but is also concerned about paying a commission if they find the buyer themselves. Considering the principles of the Real Estate Trading Act, which approach best balances the seller's objectives with the brokerage's entitlement to commission. Option A. Advise the seller to list the property without a formal agreement, relying on word-of-mouth marketing to achieve exposure. Option B. Suggest an exclusive agency listing, highlighting that the seller can find a buyer themselves without owing a commission, but without emphasizing the brokerage's efforts in marketing. Option C. Recommend an open listing, focusing solely on the wide exposure it offers, without detailing the potential for multiple brokerages to claim commission or the specific conditions for entitlement. Option D. Propose an exclusive right to sell listing, clearly explaining that the brokerage earns a commission if the property sells within the listing term, regardless of who finds the buyer, and detailing the marketing strategies the brokerage will employ to achieve broad exposure. The correct answer is D. Propose an exclusive right to sell listing, clearly explaining that the brokerage earns a commission if the property sells within the listing term, regardless of who finds the buyer, and detailing the marketing strategies the brokerage will employ to achieve broad exposure. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Prince Edward Island to navigate the nuances of different listing agreements while ensuring client understanding and adherence to the Real Estate Trading Act and its associated regulations. Misinterpreting the implications of each agreement type can lead to legal disputes, ethical breaches, and damage to the broker's reputation and the brokerage standing. The broker must balance the client's desire for broad exposure with the brokerage's need for a clear path to commission, all while operating within the specific legal framework of Prince Edward Island. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves clearly explaining the implications of each listing agreement type to the client, allowing them to make an informed decision based on their specific needs and risk tolerance. For an exclusive right to sell listing, the broker must emphasize that the brokerage earns a commission regardless of who procures the buyer, provided the sale occurs within the listing period. This aligns with the principles of the Real Estate Trading Act, which governs agency relationships and commission entitlement. This approach ensures transparency and client consent, minimizing the risk of future disputes over commission. Incorrect approaches analysis. Choosing an exclusive agency listing without fully explaining that the seller retains the right to sell the property themselves without owing a commission to the brokerage would be an ethical failure. While permitted under the Act, it creates a scenario where the brokerage expends resources without guaranteed compensation if the seller finds the buyer, potentially leading to client dissatisfaction if not clearly understood. Recommending an open listing without thoroughly detailing that multiple brokerages could be involved, and that commission is only paid to the brokerage that successfully procures the buyer who completes the transaction, is also problematic. This approach, while legal, can lead to confusion and potential disputes if not managed with extreme clarity regarding the competitive nature of the sale and the specific conditions for commission entitlement under Prince Edward Island real estate law. Recommending an open listing solely because it offers the seller the widest possible exposure without adequately explaining the potential for multiple brokerages to claim commission and the inherent risks of such an arrangement to the seller's clarity on who is owed compensation, would be a failure to uphold the duty of care and transparency required under Prince Edward Island's real estate regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a client-centric approach, prioritizing clear communication and informed consent. When presenting listing agreement options, brokers must act as trusted advisors, thoroughly explaining the legal and practical implications of each. This involves detailing commission structures, exclusivity clauses, and the rights and responsibilities of both the seller and the brokerage under Prince Edward Island's Real Estate Trading Act. A structured decision-making process would involve 1. Understanding the client's primary goals for selling. 2. Educating the client on the different listing agreement types available in Prince Edward Island. 3. Discussing the pros and cons of each type in relation to the client's goals. 4. Recommending the agreement that best aligns with the client's objectives while ensuring the brokerage commission is protected in a manner consistent with provincial law and ethical standards. Question 20. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a Prince Edward Island real estate broker has facilitated the sale of a property for $450,000. The agreed-upon commission structure is 5% on the first $200,000 of the sale price and 3% on the portion of the sale price exceeding $200,000. Additionally, goods and services tax (GST) of 5% is applicable to the commission earned. What is the total commission including GST that the broker is entitled to? Option A, $17,775.00. Option B, $23,625.00. Option C, $22,500.00. Option D, $15,575.00. The correct answer is D, $15,575.00. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Prince Edward Island real estate broker by requiring the accurate calculation of commission based on a tiered fee structure and the application of the goods and services tax, GST. Miscalculation can lead to financial disputes with clients, potential breaches of contract, damage to the broker's reputation and licensing, standing with the Prince Edward Island Real Estate Association, PERIA. Adherence to the Real Estate Services Act and its associated regulations, as well as the principles of fair dealing and transparency, is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic, step-by-step calculation that first determines the commission earned at each tier of the sale price, and then sums these amounts. Finally, the applicable GST is calculated on the total commission. This approach ensures accuracy by breaking down the complex tiered structure into manageable parts and correctly applies the tax to the earned commission, aligning with the principles of clear and accurate financial disclosure mandated by PERIA guidelines and provincial real estate legislation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves calculating the commission solely on the highest tier rate applied to the entire sale price. This fails to acknowledge the tiered nature of the agreement, resulting in an overstatement of the commission earned and a violation of the agreed-upon fee structure. It also misrepresents the actual service value provided at lower price points. Another incorrect approach is to calculate the GST on the total sale price of the property rather than on the commission earned. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of tax application and would lead to an incorrect and inflated total amount charged to the client, potentially constituting misrepresentation and a breach of trust. A further incorrect approach is to apply the highest commission rate to the entire sale price and then add GST to that inflated commission. This combines two errors: misapplying the tiered commission structure and then incorrectly calculating the tax on an overstated commission. This demonstrates a lack of diligence in understanding both the commission agreement and tax regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach commission calculations by meticulously reviewing the signed listing agreement to understand the exact terms of the fee structure, including any tiered rates or specific conditions. They should then perform calculations methodically, tier by tier, ensuring each segment of the sale price is taxed at its corresponding commission rate. The final step is to accurately calculate and add the applicable GST to the total earned commission. Transparency with the client throughout this process, by providing a clear breakdown of the calculation, is essential for maintaining trust and professional integrity.